Welcome everybody to the webinar. This is on modernizing your data warehouse with Snowflake and DataFactZ. It's being presented by both Snowflake and DataFactZ. I'm Jim Salter. I'm Director of Sales at DataFactZ, and I'll serve as the host for the webinar. It's important you're aware of three things. First, the webinar is going to be recorded so that it can be made available to you and others. Secondly, everybody's going to be on mute for the duration of the webinar. The people that can unmute are the four people that are actually presenting today. And then finally, you can ask questions throughout the webinar through the interface. We're setting aside time also for Q&A at the end of the session, but if we have a question that's relevant for the speaker at that time, I'll go ahead and share that with them. So here's what's going to happen over the next hour. First, I'll give you a very brief 1 to 2 minute overview of DataFactZ and why we partnered with Snowflake. Next, I'll introduce Amar, who's on the DataFactZ team. He'll share our perspective as from our company on data warehouse modernization and how we think it should be attacked. Mar is one of our practice leads here at the company. Next would be Catherine from Snowflake. She's a partner solution architect, and she'll delve a little bit more into the Snowflake platform and explain their value proposition. And then we'll kind of end it with hearing from a client. His name's George. He's in Southwest Michigan. He's a client of both DataFactZ and Snowflake, and he recently led a data warehouse modernization project. So we're very pleased to have him here because what he has to share might be the most relevant thing for you folks here on this call. Then we'll end it with some time for questions, and then before we drop, everybody that's on the webinar is going to be entered into a raffle for a $200 Amazon gift card, and Dana's actually getting the names ready right now. So again, I'm Jim Salter. If you want to go to the next slide, please. From DataFactZ, we're a professional services company. We specialize in helping clients really manage and leverage their data. So we're growing every year. Got about a 25% growth. We're about 800 plus employees. We have a small offshore office that we spun up about 5 years ago, but most of our clients are here in the U.S. Most of our people are here. Really what we do is two things very well: data engineering and data science. So the data engineering is things like you see on the bullets here: big data, data integration, data warehousing, things like that. And the data science team really is responsible for helping our clients leverage that data with BI and analytics and things like that. So those are really the two areas we specialize in, which is what brought us to Snowflake. If you look here, one of our core competencies is data warehousing. Snowflake got on our radar screen a few years ago. We started seeing clients wanting to transition to the platform for a lot of different reasons. So we became familiar with it, did some implementations, and we formalized a partnership with them last year and have been working pretty closely together since. So that's what really drove the interest in partnering with them on something like this. So that's really enough about us. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of who we are for those that aren't aware of us. The main reason you're here is really to hear about data warehouse modernization. So I'm going to turn it over to Amar. Amar, again, is at DataFactZ. He's a solution architect. He's a senior level guy here at the company. He manages many of our Snowflake implementation and is experienced in an array of other data integration and cloud platforms and things like that. So with no further ado, Amar, please take it away.
Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar. I'm Amar Meda Prakash. As Jim mentioned, I'm a principal solutions architect with DataFactZ. Today, I will be talking about the case for modernizing your on-premise data warehouse. To get things rolling, let's start with something that most of us are familiar with, a traditional data warehouse. So some of you may be aware of this technical landscape of implementing a data warehouse, right? You have your data sources on one end and the reporting area on the other end, with a data warehouse sitting on premise right in between these two areas. In most cases, this setup of a data warehouse works in the beginning, but over time, it comes with its own challenges, especially around maintenance. Dedicated resources are, usually needed to keep up with constantly increasing workload, scaling up or scaling down resources manually. The challenges don't just stop with the maintenance piece, though. There are numerous other drawbacks with this approach. The usual suspects being infrastructure and performance. Businesses spend large amounts of money focusing on hardware and software these days. Most cases, they may not support their long-term goals. The other major challenge is evolving data types. Now businesses are using GPS, sensor, and IoT data, to name a few. Businesses are heavily relying upon these modern data types, and traditional on-premise data warehouses are not really effective at handling them. The next challenge that most people see with traditional data warehouses is the need for supporting advanced technological capabilities. Examples include in-memory computing, real or near real-time reporting, distributed computing. So some of these things are sought after by businesses these days more than ever before. Another major challenge that businesses see nowadays is this the traditional data warehouse platform poses as a barrier for businesses to innovate, compete, and even sometimes stay relevant. So one obvious solution to these challenges is a cloud data warehouse. Besides the obvious benefits of automated maintenance and ease in administration, a cloud database or a cloud data warehouse has several other benefits. The most important feature of a cloud data warehouse is elasticity. Infrastructure and software resources can be scaled up or scaled down at a click of a button. This means huge savings. Cloud database storage solutions usually come with disaster recovery or failover tolerance mechanisms. They also provide support for remote access of data for not just data owners and administrators, but also consumers. Next, cloud data warehouse solutions come with support for diversified data types, including real-time and near real-time data ingestion techniques and complex data processing capabilities. Last but not the least, you can uh, you can definitely derive a lot more on accountability based on usage and costs, which are easier with the cloud data warehouses due to the pay-as-you-go model. Which leads to our next slide.
Okay, thanks, Amar. That gives you a little bit of a perspective at a high level of where of how we go about those types of things. The main gist of this webinar is to give you familiarity with Snowflake. We have Catherine on the line also now. She is a Snowflake partner solution architect. I think you're in Houston, right, Catherine?
I am.
So I think most of the people on the call are in the Midwest, and we're experiencing a little bit of a deep freeze. So we're a little bit envious of you. But if you can kind of take it away and share what you can about Snowflake and especially the value it provides, the value proposition, things like that, we appreciate it.
Sure. So this presentation is well themed for the weather you guys are experiencing up there.
Ironic, isn't it?
So, yeah. So I'm going to go through what Snowflake is and what we have to offer and what makes us different than both traditional technologies that you are likely familiar with, as well as our cloud competitors. So when we start looking at the problem with existing technologies and data warehouses today, Amar touched on a lot of that. Many of those challenges are propagated by the underlying technologies that the data warehouse or your analytics architecture is running on. Today's data is very diverse, and it comes in many frequencies and structures that traditional infrastructures have really struggled to accommodate. So what we've ended up with is complex technical landscapes that require specialized expertise to manage. They don't scale well, and your data ends up siloed to the technologies that best suit it versus being in one consolidated place where all of your customers or your data customers can access it. Next slide. So the Snowflake Data Warehouse was built from the ground up, from scratch, specifically for the cloud, and it introduces a new take on the data warehousing architecture. The solution capitalizes on the best of what these traditional architectures had to offer while avoiding their weaknesses. We have fully separated storage compute, and we leverage the power of the public cloud, which has enabled us to introduce a solution that scales automatically, requires no downtime for scaling, and can scale to infinite proportions. Next slide. When our founders were looking to build the solution, our founders, to provide a little bit of background, were very experienced architects at former or current big analytics companies, but they saw a gap in what their customers needed versus what those companies and technologies were delivering. So what they did when they decided that they needed to build a new solution was to sit down and identify the top 3 items on customers' wish lists for their data warehouses. And what came back was performance, concurrency, and simplicity. And so our technology was built to address these needs specifically. We offer multi-petabyte scale that has benchmarked performance at up to 200 times faster than our competitors at 1/10 the cost. The architecture, the way we've built it and designed it, enables multiple groups to access data and data integration processes to run without experiencing a performance degradation or having read-write interference. And one of the best offerings of Snowflake is that we fully manage the service for you. It is a data warehouse as a service. So we manage all of the patching, upgrades, all of those things you would traditionally spend a lot of time managing in your technology architecture. We manage that for you. And it's pay-as-you-go pricing, so you don't have to plan in advance or purchase any capacity in advance should you not need. It's on demand. Next slide. So when we look at what makes us different, what Snowflake is doing is bringing unprecedented features and functionality to the data warehouse market. So single place for data, we support both structured data and semi-structured data like JSON, XML, Avro, those sorts of data types that are becoming way more common in today's world and frequency of data production. We support both of that in an interface that you can query both the structured and the semi-structured data via SQL. So this enables your users to not have to learn any new skill sets to use Snowflake. They can use the skill sets that they already have from their previous analytics work. By leveraging the power of the cloud providers, we are on Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure at this time. So by leveraging those cloud providers, we offer infinite scale and concurrency. And as I mentioned before, the platform is delivered as a fully managed service. So those days of managing partition schemes, vacuuming your database, hardware upgrades, software, patching, etc., they're gone. One thing we are doing that is, in my opinion, one of the most exciting things we have going on at Snowflake is we're actually creating a brand new analytics market with our data sharing capabilities. So what data sharing is, it actually allows Snowflake customers to access live data from other customer accounts if that customer account shares it with them, and they can query it right alongside their own data. So if you think about what we traditionally see in data warehousing, where we're exporting data, FTPing files, importing it back into someone else's warehouse, this actually eliminates that and provides live access to data. Next slide. So this diagram here probably reflects what a lot of you see today in your companies. We see a lot of different sources feeding multiple targets through contentious batch data integration jobs. Right? This is very typical architecture that if we've worked in analytics before, we're very familiar with. Next slide. But today's analytic needs require a much more modern landscape, and one that supports a single place for all of your data and all of your users. And when we built Snowflake, we built it to answer those needs and to address those needs specifically. So with Snowflake, you're able to actually introduce a single source of truth into your organization. One place for data, one place for all of your users to access that data. Next slide. So this is our logo slide, a few of our customers. If you take a look at who's on this list, you'll notice that our customer base spans many industries at all stages of the business lifecycle. So we have companies both new world and quick to adopt new technologies, all the way to large scale corporations with strong scale, performance, and security requirements. So as you're looking at Snowflake and trying to evaluate if it's a fit for you, we likely have proven references in your own industry and at your own stage of the business lifecycle. So if we go to the ecosystem at a glance, what we want to show here is that Snowflake natively integrates with many of both the legacy and the new world technologies and analytics. And by native integration, what we mean is, for example, if you're building data integration jobs with Talend actually has Snowflake components that are tailored to Snowflake and the way Snowflake likes to write its SQL queries and receive information. With Looker and Tableau, there's actually a Snowflake connector that you can choose in those tools. So native connectivity, we have quite a bit out there. These are just some highlights, and new connectors are being built continuously. And the good news is, where native connectivity is not currently offered, any tool that supports custom ODBC and JDBC connectivity will be able to connect to and use Snowflake. So it's very likely that Snowflake would be able to come right into your existing analytics architecture and become your database and connect to your data integration tools and your BI tools on the other end of that. Next slide. So what we want to show here is that we at Snowflake commissioned Forrester Consulting to conduct a total economic impact study. And what they found was, after working with 4 Snowflake customers, they uncovered a customer return on investment of 604%. So with a Snowflake cost of around $1 million over 3 years, customers would save about $7 million, leading to a net present value of $5.9 million and a payback period of less than 3 months for Snowflake. This study found that before Snowflake, organizations were held back by their database capabilities, had limited access to data, and were struggling to choose between on-premise and cloud storage. With Snowflake, performance barriers were more easily overcome, costs were contained, and the ease of data uploads and accessibility closed security holes. So at the end of the webinar today, we're going to be sending out a link to this study if you want more details around that. And thank you.
We did have a question come in. I'd like to just throw it out there now, since you it says you talked a little bit about how Snowflake can secure data, and the question is, how granular can you get with securing data?
It's a good question. So security was actually, I would say, priority number 1 when the product was being designed and built, namely because no one's going to put their data in the cloud if it's not secure, right? So security is very important to us here at Snowflake. It can get as granular as row level and column level in your tables, views, objects. We use a role-based access control model and a discretionary access control model. So no privileges are granted to users, they're only granted to roles, and no privileges are granted out of the box. You have to explicitly grant privileges to each role that you wish to have the privilege. So that removes a lot of the risk of accidentally allowing access to something because it just came by default, right? That answered the question. We have a lot of information on security. If you would like more details, you can reach out to me and we can get you more information there.
My understanding is you can also, maybe you could just talk to this a little bit. I don't know if this was part of the question, but if you've got a data warehouse and you've got maybe suppliers or something that need access to things, you can tie things right down to a table level and stuff like that, right? And then just give them access to that through whatever tools they have to access the data. Is that true?
Yep. So what we would typically see there is that would actually be done through data sharing, our data sharing capability. We allow our customers to share both with other Snowflake customers as well as customers who are not Snowflake customers. The way you would share with someone who's not a Snowflake customer is you configure what's called a reader account for them, and they get access to whatever tables or views or objects that you grant them to in that reader account. And what we will see done with those objects is we like to recommend that our customers create secure views and use those for sharing. And the secure views, one, do not allow the consumer to see whatever logic is going on in the view. So like you can't actually see the select statement of the view. And you're also able to dynamically link the data that's in the view to the account that you're sharing it with. So you are able to say, in that case, you have suppliers and you have 5 supplier reader accounts per se. You could have one table on your side that on their side, they only see their own supplier data. They wouldn't see the data for the other 4 suppliers.
Okay. Thank you. If anybody has any other questions for Catherine or Amar for that matter, just send them in through the portal here. We're going to move on now to those of you that are considering this type of project or have already decided to do it. Will probably find the next portion of this perhaps of greatest value. George is at a company in Southwest Michigan, so he's bearing the cold weather and snow. And he's a customer of both Snowflake and DataFactZ. He recently went through data warehouse modernization in his company's data warehouse. So George, on behalf of all of us here at DataFactZ and of Snowflake, thank you for joining us. And if you can kind of take over and give your perspective of your experience and things and why you did what you did, we would appreciate it, sir.
Sure thing, Jim, and thanks for the opportunity. So we can go to the next slide, Amar. So let's start off by talking about some just high-level business objectives that we're trying to achieve. And the first one is really investing in EDW cloud migration. So our basic need was to address analysts who wanted to work with much larger data volumes with data sets that were in an on-premise legacy system, and they just couldn't handle the volumes. There was too long a response time if the database even responded at all. So we needed to address that. That was the root business need. And our organization has a strategic direction for IT systems to be in the cloud, so that drove us to looking at cloud-based solutions. And we really wanted to get into an environment where we could add capacity incrementally. So we didn't want to have to buy a huge server, of which we only used 10% for a period of time. The other 90% went unused. And therefore, you know, we're looking for that pay-per-use licensing model. So instead of making a big 6-figure investment, we just wanted to pay for the system as we used it. So why Snowflake versus the other options? We did look at a number of other cloud providers. We do use all of them to some extent, but we have a much bigger stake with Snowflake. We started off with a smaller scale adoption on a previous project. And really the need for that project was to add capacity incrementally. And in doing so, we proved out a number of the value propositions that was spoken about earlier. First, and maybe not foremost for us, but certainly very important, was it being very easy to administer. And so we've actually been using Snowflake for several years in that limited capacity. And it truly has been, once you set up your basic configurations for Snowflake and get it to work the way you want to, there hasn't been any administrative overhead beyond just adding more schemas, adding more tables as we add data content to the Snowflake environment. And we have proved out the low cost of pay per use versus purchasing something on premise. And something we found that was unique to Snowflake is just the pricing model and how they simplify the costs that are shown to us. Instead of us having to calculate and determine like how many queries we're going to run, how many reports we're going to run, and therefore how many hits are we going to have against the database, they make that much simpler. And as a result, it was much easier for us to project how much money we would need to spend in the Snowflake environment. Concurrency was one of the big issues for us because in our current on-premise systems, although they can run queries extremely fast, typically they can only run a few queries in concurrency before the whole system bogs down. So we wanted to get away from that, and by implementing the compute engines, it allowed us to do just that and resolve some of our concurrency issues there. And we were also interested in working with data in its native state as much as possible, and this includes semi-structured data. And this is something that we've just more recently gotten into, but taking data in JSON files, for example, and storing them directly in Snowflake and writing queries over those Snowflake files. Again, we're just piloting it, but that holds a lot of promise for us and for our analysts. And then finally, security. So we have our own independent security team within my organization. And before we can use any technology, it has to be approved and vetted by that security team. And the fact that Snowflake had certifications and they follow certain security standards, it made it much easier for that team to go through its assessment and give us the thumbs up to go forward with Snowflake. As far as rationale for contractors, I mean, there's always the bottom line of just adding more capacity to a limited team. That was certainly the case for us, but we also had, my team members had expertise in certain technologies, but not others that were needed to pull this complete solution together. And DataFactZ provided that cross-technology knowledge. And at the same time, it enabled my internal staff to come up to speed wherever they might have gaps on a certain technology. And the end result was a turnkey solution that was very feasible for us to support going forward with the skill set that we had with the members on my team. And then finally on this slide, talking about short and long-term goals, pretty straightforward. The short-term goals really were to enable our business analysts to fully leverage modern BI tools without the limitations of dated technologies. And some of our longer-term goals are to enable those same analysts to do more self-service data preparation. So start allowing them to blend data into the cloud-based database and adding their own third-party data and using that in the modern BI platform. The high-level architecture diagram, just trying to give everybody a picture of what this looks like. So wherever you see a component highlighted in red, those are our legacy on-premise data technologies. And everything is blue is things that we've tried to add new to modernize our environment. So just as Amar talked about earlier, we had a traditional source system ERP loading into a data warehouse that was loading data into OLAP MDX cubes. And we had a lot of legacy ad hoc reports and dashboards that were built over that. So that was an environment that had created and has been evolving for a good 10 to 12 years. And we really hadn't invested a whole lot into modernizing that. So our first step was to add a modern ad hoc BI platform on top of that. So that platform did support the MDX technologies. We did get it to work. We could write queries, but where it started to fall down was when we tried to pull larger data sets out of the MDX cubes. We started to getting long delay times, not only for that individual report, but it affected all the users that were trying to query against that cube. And it also, there was times where the data just didn't come back at all. So we investigated that for several months, and really we ultimately ended up deciding that was something in the MDX protocol, converting that data to the BI platform. So we shifted gears a bit, and we set up this project where we replicate the data that's going into our data warehouse, our on-premise data warehouse, out to Snowflake. So the idea in the actual implementation really was a lift and shift of our data model into the Snowflake cloud environment. We didn't have to do a ton of changing of the data model, data types, and that sort of thing in order for it to work in Snowflake. And from there, we built our traditional metadata back into our modern BI platform. So that enabled all of our analysts to create their reports, create their dashboards, create their visualizations in that modern tool, and achieving that really base objective of allowing them to work with pretty much unlimited data set sizes. So that's our short-term objective. Our longer-term objective, which we started to make tracks on, was allowing analysts and different IT people to replicate data from other sources. Some of it on-prem, but the majority of it is really third-party SaaS providers, replicating that data as is into the Snowflake cloud environment, and then allowing them to use modern data wrangling, data blending techniques in a modern BI platform, and either do analysis over that replicated source system data itself, or blend that data with our data warehouse. All right, so this is the timeline. All in all, the project took about 6 months. And I'm not going to go through all the bullet points, break down by individual month, but I just had some thoughts I'd want to share with the audience. And the first one is, if you're going to initiate a project like this, don't just give them a documentation of your data model and say, this is what you have to work with. Allow them time to actually get into your source systems, poke around, and verify that your documentation is actually up to date and relevant. That proved to be very useful for us. The other piece of advice I would have here is show incremental deliverables. So again, taking a page out of an agile kind of framework. Don't wait to the end before of a 6 month, in this case, project, before you actually start having data available in your modern BI platform. Even if it's something that analysts cannot make use of right away, at least produce something that they can start generating reports from and get an idea of what the performance and feedback of this new architecture will be for you. The third point would be to automate your data validations. So keep in mind, the data is literally the same. And so the outputs from both your legacy system and your new cloud-based environment should be the same as well. And in building this kind of replication process, it's very, very valuable to automate the validation between the old and the new, or the source system and the new. And that's a tool that you can put to use going forward as well. Any new data sets that you start to pull into the data warehouse, it's very helpful to have those data validations to make sure there's no data quality, data integrity issues. And then finally, plan for unforeseen complexities in your data warehouse model. So avoid the temptation to say, we have got a Snowflake model, and yes, we can lift it and shift it into Snowflake. Just plan for use cases that might not be in your documentation, like somebody setting up a view for a use case 5 years ago that wasn't considered during the project initiation. So that's all I had, Amar. I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, George. I couldn't emphasize more on your points. So those were some great points for a successful project implementation. So DataFactZ has delivered similar cloud migration projects before for several of our clients. What I'm showing you here now, I'm hoping you're able to see the screen. If not, there will be a recording available later. So what you're seeing on my screen right now is a typical cloud migration project team that we offer. Not saying that there is a hard and fast rule of how the team should look like, but this is usually what works. There is a customer team and a DataFactZ team, and there are some subject matter experts from the customer team, and there are architects and a customer success representative from our team. So we kind of work in tandem to make sure a project is implemented and seen to success. Like I said, this is not a hard and fast rule. Our typical delivery models are very flexible to accommodate the client's, technical landscape, and their current teams. We also have many engagement models with our customers. Some of the most popular ones are like the statement of work, where we predefine the amount of work that we can provide for a fixed amount, and these we'll take control of the full project, and we deliver a turnkey solution for you. We also do some staff aug. There are other models also available for us to deliver. These are some of our customers that we work with. Something that we can put together in a slide, but there are more from different industries. Um, but Jim, do you want to take from here?
Sure. Thank you, Amar, and George. Thank you. We had quite a few questions came in throughout the discussion here, starting with questions for Catherine, but the most of them came for George. So I'm going to go through those first, if that's okay, George. Who was involved in deciding to go to the cloud, and specifically Snowflake?
So that was largely me and my team. I'm the team manager over the North American data warehouse team for my organization, and we're really given a large discretion on which technologies to use. Funding is a different matter. I have to go higher up the chain there to actually get approval for funding, and that's where the pay-per-use model became very helpful to convince them that, hey, what we're trying to do here is not going to cost that much. Even if it is not successful, we have not spent a lot on this technology.
Did you have a data warehouse before Snowflake, and if so, what was it?
Yes, we have we actually have 3 different data warehouses before Snowflake, and I'm going to decline on stating exactly which ones they were for competitive reasons. But I can say we're looking very strongly at Snowflake for moving forward with a lot of them.
Okay, makes sense. What consumption layer are you using on top of Snowflake, and were any changes made in this, it says here, with the Snowflake migration? So I'm assuming they're talking about, are you using BI? Are you using, what types of things is the business using to access that data warehouse?
Right. So we do have an enterprise standard BI platform. We use MicroStrategy, and that's not to say that our business analysts cannot connect to the data sources with another tool, but that's the one that the MicroStrategy is the one that the IT organization formally supports. And did we have to change? What was the last half of that question? Do we have to change any configurations or anything in the MicroStrategy platform?
I think they're saying, I think the gist of the question is, did you make changes on a consumption layer at the same time as you did with the data warehouse? So they framed it in, and I'm reading into that, but it says, were any changes made here with the Snowflake migration? In other words, did you change any consumption layer when you moved to Snowflake?
We didn't. Yes, we adopted the MicroStrategy consumption layer. So they were using a different BI provider when they were querying against those legacy systems I was talking about. And one of the real drivers here is they wanted to adopt MicroStrategy, and we set it up over the initial MDX technology, and that's where we ran into the volume limitations. And so they are continuing to use MicroStrategy over that Snowflake layer. And we did have to build out a complete set of metadata for this project. So for the data that was being queried out of Snowflake, and that was encompassed in that 6-month time frame. So Amar and my team, within that 6 months, they did all the data replication and they built out the metadata.
Okay. Thank you. This one I think is probably for Catherine, but maybe Amar, you can pipe in too. We're a financial company. What use cases have you seen in financial services?
So I'll answer from our side. one of our biggest customers is actually Capital One, and they're one of our most interesting customer stories as well. So they decided to try Snowflake on a small scale and liked it so much that they not only upgraded their services, but decided to become an investor in Snowflake. So they actually are one of our venture capitalist investors as well as a customer. But by the end of this year, their entire data warehousing analytics platform will be on Snowflake. They will have 100% migrated over to Snowflake. I think they were probably our first financial services customer, but we have many since. And if you're interested, we can give you some of those references for your research about what they've done with Snowflake.
Thank you, Catherine. Amar, do you have any comments or no?
No.
Okay. I think this is probably for Amar, but maybe Catherine. How long do cloud migration, it says how long do cloud migration take? So I think they mean, so I presume they're talking about a data warehouse. George, I think, mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, was about 6 months. Maybe you could talk about a range, what a small one looks like, what a complex one looks like, and maybe you could talk to, and this for Amar and Catherine, I think, what are the triggers that affect that timeline would, I think, be relevant.
Sure. That's a great question again. Like George mentioned earlier, one of the key success factors for implementing such a data warehouse migration to cloud is having the technical teams have a little bit of deep dive into the systems and assess the complexity and the nature of the data they're trying to migrate. For a small scale data warehouse, it could range from 3 months to 4 months to a medium scale, where a medium scale data warehouse could be something that involves between a range of 75 to 100 tables with a lot of different types of diversified data flowing into the system and multiple technologies involved in the maintaining the data warehouse. Something like that would take a little over 6 months. But again, this is not a hard and fast timeline set. It requires a little bit of assessment, understanding the data. At the end of the day, giving an accurate and an efficient framework to migrate to the cloud is, it's always successful. So I would say for a decent sized data warehouse, it would be like 6 months, at least from our experience.
So what George went through is pretty typical, it sounds like, from what you've seen.
That is true. With them, like George mentioned, they had a couple of different technologies already in place. We were moving from MDX to MicroStrategy. We were also looking at different types of data flowing into the system. There were different migration patterns for different types of data. Some were incremental, some were full load. So all of these kind of take some time to assess. Typically, it's about 6 months.
Okay, so Catherine, do you have any comments in that area? What does a small one look like? I know we're working with you guys on a client that doesn't have a data warehouse right now, so theirs isn't. They got to create a data model and stuff like that. But what does a small timeline look like in a complex one, like a Capital One or something you had mentioned there? I would assume that's major. What are your thoughts, though?
Yeah, I think Amar did a really good job of covering it, and I agree with what he said in terms of timing. It also is going to depend, on the approach you decide upon. So we have seen many approaches invoked at our customers. So when you're thinking of migrating, right, you're typically thinking of a lift and shift type of migration, actually moving everything off of one technology onto another and turning the original technology off. But you don't actually have to do that if you wanted to get up on Snowflake quicker and scale back your existing infrastructure. So what you could actually do is employ a different approach of going live with Snowflake, doing a mass move of the data that you have in your legacy technology today, moving that over. We've seen that done in as little as a month, in a pretty automated scriptable process. So, figuring out the differences in the data types between the technology and converting the data model and the values, if necessary, over. And so getting that mass amount of bulk data over, and then actually scaling back your existing technology so that it only needs to support like incremental changes to the data. And then you would just have an incremental feed to Snowflake. So you don't actually have to rewrite any of your legacy data integration code right away. You can do that over time. There isn't a like massive lift and shift date. It's an overtime evolution of the migration. So what that ends up happening or helping you with is you get to scale back your legacy technology, and so lessen your cost there while still taking advantage of Snowflake. And so immediately gaining the benefits of Snowflake and still lessening your cost of your legacy technology, but buying yourself time to be able to migrate over with confidence.
Okay, thank you. We have right now 3 more questions. If anybody has some additional ones, please feel free to ask. We still are okay on time. I think this one is for George. Did you use internal data architects to help design the cloud data warehouse or one of the Snowflake partners?
Well, first of all, there wasn't a whole lot of data architecture required because remember, this was a lift and shift. I mean, our data model that we had in the legacy data warehouse was really lifted and shifted in pretty much the exact format into Snowflake. But what data architecture did exist, it was a combination of somebody on my team and somebody on the DataFactZ team working in collaboration.
Okay. I'm going to throw this out there because I don't know who this is best answered by, but is it necessary to use AWS S3 bucket for a landing area, or can we create this data lake in Snowflake? So maybe
I can answer that.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. Catherine, might be you.
Yeah, so what's interesting about Snowflake is even though we're on these cloud providers, so our entire architecture or infrastructure runs on AWS or Azure, you don't have to be an existing customer of one of those cloud providers or either of those cloud providers to use Snowflake. So Snowflake can be fully internally managed. And what that means is, yes, we can point to external S3 buckets that you have in your own AWS account or blob storage locations that you have in your Azure account, but you could also just completely use Snowflake and Snowflake service to manage all of that storage. So those are called internal stages, and you would just load your data into those internal stages in Snowflake. You do get billed for the storage that you are using in those internal stages from Snowflake. So Snowflake will pass the cost on to you. Whereas if you are using external stages, which is your own cloud provider account and storage locations, that billing for that storage will come from that cloud provider. But you can do either way. So you don't have to have an Amazon account or an Azure account to use Snowflake.
Okay, that dovetails into this question for you, Catherine. How is it priced? And it also says I have an AWS account. Does that affect it?
So Snowflake pricing is your bill will reflect 2 different categories, storage and compute. Storage, we do not mark up the cloud provider's pricing at all. We just pass on, what we're billed to you. So I think it comes out to in like AWS West. It's $23 a terabyte a month. So you can keep in mind that's the pricing for storage. One thing that's very cool about Snowflake, and if you start playing with it, you'll see this, you can see it firsthand, is let's say I have 10 gigabytes of data I'm loading in. once I load that into Snowflake, it's no longer 10 gigabytes of data. We actually employ an algorithm that compresses it down. So when you put these files into Snowflake stages, they actually get compressed. So your 10 gigabytes of data will go down to like 5 or 6. So your storage costs will actually be a little lower than what you might think from a raw data standpoint. From a compute perspective, that's where you get billed for the Snowflake service. And so the pricing for that depends on which Snowflake edition you go with. So it starts at $2 an hour and I think goes up to $16 an hour times however many instances you decide to run, right? So it's like a base instance is anywhere from $2 to $16 an hour. We do bill by the second, so you're not going to get billed $2 if you run a $2 warehouse for, 2 minutes, right? You'll get billed partial credits. So the breakdown of that pricing is all on our website. You can actually select the different regions and the different editions and see the changes in price. We do offer an incentive to buy up front. So we have on-demand customers and we have capacity customers. On-demand customers are truly pay-as-you-go. The pricing there is a little higher than our capacity customers. Capacity customers are able to plan out what they think they need in terms of Snowflake resources, and they buy that up front. And as an incentive, we discount the pricing there. So you can go out to our website and see all of that.
Thank you, Catherine. We have a few more questions. If I want to leave a few minutes for Raffle and to wrap this thing up. So if we could be brief on the last couple responses, I would appreciate it. We had one other question that George, I don't know if you can answer this, and if you're not, maybe we can ask Amar and Catherine for their thoughts on just generally. But which ETL tool did you use?
We used the ETL tool that was part of the legacy system. It was a full BI stack for that legacy system, and we just modified that really to replicate the endpoints, the tables that were written out to the legacy database. We simply modified it to write out to the Snowflake. At a high level conceptual, that was the plan. Amar would probably have more details on if the actual implementation deviated from that plan very much.
So Amar, thank you for that, George. Amar, have you seen, is there a difference in the ETL tools you use piping into Snowflake? Is there, can you use pretty much anything, or is there some that are better than others, or, just talk for 30 seconds on that.
Sure. If you can see my slide, Catherine put this together. So, Snowflake is, works really well with most of the ETL tools right there, out there. So some of the tools that works with Snowflake is Informatica, Talent, Alteryx, SnapLogic. But we have used, for this customer, we used Microsoft SQL Server Integration Services. But, you pretty much have drivers for any kind of tool that you need.
Okay, Catherine, anything to add?
I think that covers it. It's, there's partners that you'll see we promote on our website that they'll have the native integrators, but yes, you can use JDBC or ODBC to work with any of these tools.
Two last questions, and then we're going to wrap. This one's for George. What was your biggest challenge, and how did you deal with it?
The biggest challenge was dealing with the unknowns in the complexity of our data model. So remember, this was a data model that had been created and evolved over at least 10 to 12 years. And during the initiation phase of the project, we were trying to figure out, how long would this take and what's the plan. We didn't have a lot of time to focus on that, and so there was things that we didn't uncover until we got into the actual implementation. And the way we did that was just working really closely and collaboratively with DataFactZ, having bi-weekly working sessions to answer any questions on the part of DataFactZ as far as why the system is working the way it is. So just close collaboration was the bottom line as far as how we dealt with it.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question, I think this is probably for Catherine. Is there a way that I can test Snowflake before buying?
Yep. So we're, on demand. And so you can actually go and sign up for an account on our website. It's called a self-service account, and it'll be created for you, I think, within 15 minutes. And you can just start playing with it. And I think you get 400 free credits for the first 30 days. And then you'll get billed for anything over that. But if you're just playing with it, it's going to be pretty difficult to go through those credits unless you're trying to play with ginormous data sets. And yep, go ahead and do that.
And then I'll just comment on that too. If somebody's interested in doing a POC or something like that, and a lot of companies do these on their own, but if you needed some help, DataFactZ certainly is open to helping you with a POC. And I know the Snowflake reps are creative on those types of things too. So with that, I thank you all for joining. You'll get an email from, I don't know, Catherine, is Snowflake going to send out a note too, or is it just going to come from me? You know?
I'm not actually sure. I can check on that, and then I'll let you know.
So you're going to get a note from me, and I'm happy to include, Catherine, the link for the Forrester report download. I will include that. I'm going to include a link for a trial software download that you mentioned. I'll get that from you or Amy or somebody. And then I wanted to let everyone know if this is, if what you heard is of interest enough to come to a workshop. We're doing a workshop as a follow-up to this webinar toward the end of February. It's on the 20th of February. It's going to be in Troy, Michigan. We're going to feed you, and it's basically like a half-day type thing. Show up in the morning. We get something to eat, and really you bring your laptop and you get a Snowflake account set up, and you do all these types of things, but it's really meant to be a hands-on thing. I think Amar is going to be there. Somebody from Snowflake, I'm almost positive, will be there. And then there's also something that Snowflake is hosting along with Talent and DataFactZ in Detroit in March, and we'll send a link on that with both of these things too. If you wanted to register, you're more than welcome. So you'll get that note by the end of today or tomorrow at the latest. And the very last thing we wanted to do before we let you go, Dana, thank you. Put all these in the names in a little basket here. We just chose one, and we're doing a raffle. This is for a $200 Amazon gift card, right, Dana? So it's Matt Siraj from Golden Insurance Agency won that. So Matt, we'll be in touch with you through email on how to get that. It's probably just going to be an online type thing. So again, thanks everybody for joining. We had a great turnout, lots of great questions. We'd be thrilled if we can work together on something here in the future with Snowflake. And with that, we'll end the webinar. It's exactly 3 o'clock, so the timing's perfect. Thanks everyone. And if you're interested in the workshop on February 20th, we'll see you there. Thanks very much.